The Pleasure Seekers was a book that I had in my head for many years before I actually started writing it. It was my attempt at trying to reinvent family history. So it is by no means a memoir, but it does draw heavily from autobiographical stories. I was very interested at some point about my parents as people before they became my parents. I think it's an interesting point in a life when that happens, and for me it happened as a teenager when I discovered my mother's love letters to my father. And it was the first time I realized that there was conflict for their marriage, that it was not this sweet love story that had been presented to me. And so I wrote the novel as a way to reinvent a story that nobody would tell me. And I think part of why I became a writer is because very few people in my family told stories, and I had a great desire to know them. And I wrote it as a fiction because I had the freedom to make up things and to make my own truth, as it were. And so the book is a love story. It's a cross, sort of reverse cultural love story where a Westerner, a woman from Wales, comes to India in the late 60s. She's in a very traditional Gujarati Jain family in Madras, and then it goes backwards and forwards from there. And for me, it was interesting about this idea of where we begin and where we end up. For someone like my mother, who was born in a one-street village in North Wales, to land up in Madras, a city of 8 million. And I think through the novel, I was also trying to tell a story about India, how it has changed, and a story about love and how our relationships and love affairs have changed, because, you know, we don't write love letters anymore. So how will our children find out our love stories? So this is a story talking about all those things and more. In a sense, everything has been fictionalized. Even the thing that is true ceases to be true. There is a process in writing when you are using memory, which is in any case a highly uncertain entity. You know, we use our memories to our own advantage, and as writers, being very creative people, we remember things differently. There are things that I absolutely think of as true from my childhood, which when I then tried to confirm with my mother, she said, no, that's not how it happened at all. You know, you did not get your ears pierced in Gujarat. We took you to Vumudi in Madras, and we did not use the needle, but it was the, you know, the gun or whatever. And you think, where did that memory come from, which was so true, which felt so right? And at some point, it ceases to matter whether it's true or no, because whether I went to get my ears pierced in Vumudi in Madras, in my mind, I did this imaginary ear piercing in some small village in Gujarat, and that is the truth. And so working in fiction, it's very interesting because you can change and manipulate things to arrive at a truth that is beyond what is the truth of reality and what really happened. You're trying to arrive somewhere else. And I think while you're writing, you don't even know where you're trying to arrive. But when you get there, you know it. And so it's a strange and mysterious process. I spoke to both my parents a little bit about their early years because I had photographs and these letters, so I was trying to match the people I had in front of me with those young creatures who were wandering around India in bell-bottoms and an ambassador and posing by rocks and temples and fountains and all of this. And I tried to see what happened to those two young people. These are not them, you know. I spoke to my father about his days as a student in the YMCA in London in the late 60s and early 60s, what that was like. And I tried to get from my mother the kind of alienation she might have felt to live for 8 years with her in-laws, with you know, my father's mother who did not speak any English, only Gujarati, and, you know, this completely different lifestyle. And I don't think I really got it, but I used my own experience of my own alienation, of my own trips, going away from home at 17 to America. And even though it's not the same thing, alienation is universal, loneliness is universal. So you take your own things and you superimpose it on something else. And in the fiction, you know, what you're trying to arrive at is that truth that I was talking about. And it doesn't matter what the real experience was. I feature very heavily in the book because it is a first novel, and unlike novelists who, you know, vehemently reject that anything is autobiographical, I've always said quite openly that it is very much a family story and my story, and the characters are all infused with something of me, I feel, whether it is Bean's sort of childhood of being scared of ghosts and of being this child that is neither this nor that, this mixed hodgepodge child, that was me, or the alienation of Shan, which is the character which is very loosely based on my mother, or you know, even the character of Ba, who is very loosely based on Chandralekha, my dance teacher, in terms of the white hair and the magic that she took around with her. I think I am in all of the characters, and that is why I have such tenderness for them. I think I was very fond of all the characters in my book because I was in them all. It's a third-person, you know, narrator. It's not told from any particular view. I would say the three main characters are Babo, who's the young man who goes away, Bean, his daughter, and Ba, the mother of Babo. So it's the three Bs, and they are of the three different generations. And the novel zooms into their lives to tell the story of this entire family, but they are the principal characters. The novel begins in 1968 when the Russian tanks are invading Czechoslovakia and Babo is going away to London, the first person in his family to go on a plane, and it ends in 2001 during the earthquake in Bhuj in Gujarat. So that's the time frame of the novel. And one of the difficulties of writing the novel was how to deal with the notion of time, because as a poet, my notion of time is very different. As a dancer, my notion of time is different. It's contained in the body in a different way. And then in the novel, you have all these characters, all these bodies, and how do you represent their notions of time? So this is something I struggle with hugely, and I think I had a few tricks. One of the tricks I took from Hindi and Bollywood cinema, which was the notion of the song, which was, you know, you begin the song when the children are young, and then by the end of the song, they have become grown-ups and fallen in love. And the song, it's like a fast forward, you know, you go through, so how do you fast forward and pause, and how do you do that in a novel? And I think with the sense of vignettes, with the sense of I think bringing a certain poetry to fiction, I'm able to fast forward a little bit and zoom and pause. And it's tricky because, you know, you can write a novel that's about one whole day, or you can write a novel about 100 years, and people have written that. But it's still, the notion of time is, I think, the most important question to deal with when you're writing a novel. The notion of time and rhythm, with poetry and dance, I think it's extremely compatible sort of relationship, but very different in that I think it is, you know, I was writing poetry well before I started dance. My career in dance was accidental. I began at 26 and I started writing poems seriously when I was 20. And but I think it was through dance that I understood a little bit more this notion of time and how we carry it with us. You know, in a very basic way, when I'm reciting a poem, my body is also moving while I'm reciting. My feet are going tuck, tuck, tuck. You know, it is moving to something which is composed in the head and then written on the paper and then rehearsed and heard. I do that with fiction too. It has to sound right, and that has to do with time, and it has to do with rhythm. And when I was dancing, you know, we always imagine dance to a beat. But when I worked with Chandra, she had sort of dispensed with musicians for some time, and she was working in silence. Only for the performance, the musician would come later. I worked with the Gundecha brothers, wonderful Dhrupad, the classical musicians, and they layered on top a texture of music. And it was so fascinating to me that you could have dance without music. And so every day for 6 months, I would go to the theatre and I would do a performance that would range from 60 minutes to 63 minutes, changing minutely depending on how long you hold it or if you go through quickly. And then, you know, your body has its own talam. It's keeping time in its own way, and you then become intuitive about time. And when you can bring that level of intuition to poetry or to fiction, you know, this is too slow, I need to speed it up, or I need to stay here and linger a bit longer. And that is how I think with dance and poetry, you know, it happened.